The 15-inch M4 MacBook Air is the Mac I use the most. I mean, sure, I have other models on hand, like the iMac here for more casual home computing. I also have a Mac Mini set up in my bedroom for similar stuff, some work as well. And then I have my really beefed up M4 Mac Studio setup at work for intense creative, purposes like video editing and photo editing, high resolution images, all that. But this machine pretty much does it all, like 80% of what I do, because a lot of my job involves just regular office, business back-end administrative tasks like emails and contracts and writing and researching and task management and Notion and all of that. So I do it all on here, which is why when macOS Tahoe or version 26 became publicly available in the form of the public beta, which is, more refined, more, close to what the final version is going to be in terms of stability and all that, I was really anxious to install it on here. And without giving too much away, I think it's possibly the most underrated update this year, even though iOS 26 and iPadOS 26 sort of, steal the thunder. But this update is really quite something. So in this video, I'm gonna get into my favorite features and why it really supercharges my already amazing MacBook Air productivity experience. All right, so first up, let's discuss the most obvious change with this update. We'll just get it out of the way, and that, of course, is the new redesign with Liquid Glass, which I am such a big fan of for so many reasons. But if I was to sum it up quickly, it just brings this breath of fresh air or new life to your pre-existing Mac hardware, specifically the iMac that I have there, which, has tangible glass design elements that mesh so well with the new icons that are made of glass or liquid glass, the transparent ones specifically, which I absolutely adore, and the glass buttons in Control Center, and the toggles and settings, and the invisible menu bar, and the general roundedness of the UI, and other glassy elements, and the transparency and all that. And the way light wraps around the liquid glass elements is just so delicious and mesmerizing, almost distracting to a degree. Like I kind of want to watch the user interface opposed to doing my work, but better that than going on TikTok, I guess. It just looks amazing and just complements your Mac hardware in a way that feels natural, like drawn from Apple's DNA. Believe it or not, this was a very strategic design move. It didn't just come out of left field. This isn't some Hail Mary attempt to get you to be more interested. They had an already great design. macOS Yosemite looked great. It was based on, of course, iOS 7 that came out the year before. And, there was really no reason to just throw the baby out with the bathwater. They're all about evolution, not like completely redesigning everything for the sake of redesigning it like we see across the industry. So this liquid glass, this tangibility, this realism brought back from previous versions that had, the aqua elements and the skeuomorphism like macOS Mavericks and even the first gen or version of macOS 10 back in 2000 and 2001, that realism and glassiness and some of the skeuomorphism has been brought back, but properly combined with the flat vibe or design brought with Yosemite and iOS 7, Johnny Ives' brainchild, so to speak. So I'm glad they combined the two and not only have given macOS this new feel, but this sort of old nostalgic Apple feel as well that I'm just such a big fan of because I'm a nostalgia nut. So if you've been using macOS for a while, since the macOS 10 days, you're really gonna appreciate this. And if you haven't, it just makes the experience even more, again, alive and fresh and fun. And I also just love the cohesiveness, if that makes sense, and the unification of just the experience across the platforms. I've been using iPadOS and iOS and even watchOS with this new design, and it just feels like uniform, which has not been the case for several years. So again, this is just such a wonderful new look for so many reasons in terms of just the new amalgamation of it all, and it again pulling from older versions, the nostalgia aspect and how it looks with the hardware. I'm really excited to see how, Mac hardware is influenced by this update, and also too, this update draws its look and feel from visionOS, which is the future of the company and Apple and the Apple experience in general. So it's drawing upon so many things to create this really amazing new look and feel, so to speak, even though you can't physically feel the buttons and whatever, they have more of a feel to them than the flat look from before, if that makes sense. It kind of reminds me of like Steve Jobs going like,
one of the design goals was when you saw it, you wanted to lick it. and so we call it Aqua.
The icons look so great, you could just lick them. That's how I feel. We got that energy back, but with a modern twist. But anyway, the next feature on my list here isn't exactly as groundbreaking, but it's certainly super underrated, and that is the addition of a phone app. This is something that wasn't on my wish list if I had one, but I'm so glad it's here, and also in iPadOS, because for years, you really had to just default to grabbing your phone to make a phone call, which is a little dangerous for me because I get lost on my phone and social media, but beyond that, it's just inconvenient, and yes, there was handoff and all that, but you know, there really wasn't any good way to make a phone call. And then we had the Phone Connect feature, whatever that's called. I'm forgetting the Apple marketing term. So you could access your phone that way, but the phone app just makes a lot of sense. It has its own sort of iOS mixed with macOS, of course, style UI with your favorites and sort of the contacts page mixed in. And you can also dial a number as well. So it's just like fancy handoff via an app, but I'm here for it because it makes your Mac feel more standalone, which I like, and it also keeps me off of my phone too. The app also benefits from all the iOS 26 updates like call screening and the hold feature and live translation and all of that. So not only do you get all of the new additions to iOS, but also again, this whole standalone app that can allow you to, you know, directly make phone calls from your contacts and also the dialer without picking up your phone, which I think is a big productivity win for me, especially if you're an ADHD, chronically distracted person like me as well. But anyway, before we continue with the video though, I have a brief message from the people that made today's video possible, Monday.com, and their incredible, fully customizable work platform designed to help you manage tasks, projects, and team collaboration all in one place. You can create boards to organize your workflow, assign responsibilities, and set deadlines with a clear visual layout. It supports multiple views like Kanban, Gantt, Timeline, and Calendar, so whether you're planning ahead or tracking day-to-day progress, you can choose the format that fits your style. Automation is built right in, so things like status updates, reminders, or file handouts can run in the background, saving time and reducing manual work. It also integrates with tools like Slack, Google Drive, and Zoom, so your team doesn't have to bounce between platforms just to stay aligned. And with the powerful new AI features, Monday.com now helps you work even smarter. The AI assistant can generate task summaries, craft project briefs, and even suggest next steps based on your team's activity, helping you cut down on meetings and keep everyone aligned. It can draft emails, meeting notes, or progress reports in seconds, turning hours of admin into minutes. You can also use AI to create custom automations with simple prompts, so repetitive tasks practically take care of themselves. Whether you're assigning tasks, generating updates, or analyzing workloads, AI reduces busy work and lets you focus on the high-impact stuff. If you want to streamline your workflow, boost collaboration, and get a real-time intelligent view of your work, my viewers can try Monday.com for free using the link in the description. But anyway, back to the video here. Next up, I want to talk about updates to a feature that is so core to the Mac experience. It's something that differentiates it from other Apple devices, even though other Apple devices have a form of it. And that, of course, is Spotlight Search. It has been completely rethought and revamped and also redesigned with Liquid Glass, which looks phenomenal. But yeah, this is probably, I think, the biggest update it's gotten since its inception in 2005 with macOS 10, Tiger, Puma, Cheetah, whatever was going on that year, I can't remember. But my point is, it's all new, specifically in the way it is organized. So if you hover your mouse over it, there are little bubbles, liquid glass bubbles that sort of bubble out, and you get 4 different categories. The first is apps, and this replaces Launchpad, which was just antiquated and just too big and clunky. So I'm so happy that apps are in a more unified spot that sort of resembles the app drawer. It's very clean, lovely, so I'm a big fan of that. You can also search for apps too. Then you have a files category where you have new categorizations above where you can pick like different formats and types, you know, all that. So you can sort of refine your search. Also, AI is sort of in there in terms of finding your files and all that. I don't know how that works, but you know, Apple Intelligence is involved there. And yeah, it just makes finding the right file easier. So I'm a big fan of that. There's also, I think, a new grid view. Maybe I'm wrong, but that also looks great, especially with the Liquid Glass redesign. And then you have a actions automations category. Hold on, I need to, Okay, it's called Actions, everybody. I swear remembering all these Apple-specific terms is going to be the death of me one day. But anyway, you can now do stuff in line in Spotlight, if that makes sense. So you can click, you know, a given action and then type in what you want and then click enter and it'll do it for you, if that makes sense. I'll probably have a visual that makes sense of what I just said. But you can also set customizable keyboard shortcuts or quick keys to toggle one of these without having to go into the Actions menu and finding that. So you can do SM to send a message right in line in Spotlight without ever having to open the app. You can also set a timer or set a reminder or send an email if you use the mail client, which I don't, but I kind of wish I do because that's pretty convenient. So that is really amazing, really great for quick productivity without diving into apps. And I think that's great for me too, to not get as distracted, because if I open up the Messages app, then I'm gonna look at other messages, and like, it's better to just sort of do that one thing and just be done with it, again, without ever having to leave Spotlight. And then the final category is your clipboard, a visual one, which we have not had for years. And it just makes so much sense, especially for me, because I'm copying PDFs and texts and emails and ChatGPT text and just all this stuff, and having to keep track of that is annoying. And what if you have multiple things you want to be copying back and forth and you want to juggle things? Well, now you can see what's in your clipboard, and I think that's phenomenal. It's also great if you're doing creative work, which I've yet to do with this update because I'm keeping my Mac Studio on the last version just for stability. But when I update that, and also my MacBook Pro, which I use for Final Cut Pro and photo editing, I can now look at all the assets that I have, photos and videos and text and whatever else, without having to like go, oh, I need to copy that again, or I can only have one thing at a time. It just opens up a whole new world of possibilities there, like a whole new dimension in terms of utilizing the clipboard, which is such an important part of my workflow as is. So yeah, big fan of Spotlight. It just makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more focused as well, and so much more powerful. So it's something I'm definitely going to be using more of now and into the future as it gets even better. But beyond the huge changes made to Spotlight, next up I want to highlight some features involving Finder or files or file management in general that I find really helpful or important. The first is the ability to have different color folders. For years we've just had that default blue, and honestly, even though I have good muscle memory in terms of where my files are, like how the folders work, how I can navigate through them, even I am like, which folders, which, because reading a label is so much harder in the moment than picking a color.
So maybe I'm just slow.
But having different colored folders allows me to just use less mental energy to just go from one thing to one thing to one thing. So I haven't quite figured out how to color coordinate everything, but I'm going to. And I know for a fact I'm not going to get as easily lost in my folders within folders, especially on the external drive that I use to do all my creative work, because there's so many different folders for so many different drafts and file types and whatever. Anyway, you can also tag folders and files with emojis, which is helpful. So that's an even more specific way to categorize files and folders and such. I actually already make use of emojis in Notion because they have you pick one for your page names. I also add extra ones so they show up in my sidebar. So just like with colored folders, I can better differentiate or navigate or pick which page I want without just having to read the names. This isn't so much the case with the tags, but I'm excited to maybe associate some of the emojis I've already been using with certain file types or folders, so that's really interesting. And then the last thing I want to discuss here is the new preview just UI. Of course, it's liquid glass, but it looks incredible, and it looks just like it does on the iPad, which I love. The iPad preview experience is chef's kiss. I'll talk more about that in another video where I go over the iPadOS public beta and more. But yeah, I love the way it looks, and the reason I say that is because I'm always in it, reading over contracts, signing contracts, looking at PDFs for product briefs and this and that, and it's an app that I'm in so much, and the UI hasn't changed that much over the years, even with the Yosemite redesign. So now it looks way different, and it's just gorgeous to look at and use. So I'm glad that that design and UI makes sort of a mundane app something special now, or something I want to use more, even if I'm not the biggest fan of going over contracts and PDFs, etc. But anyway, and to do a complete 180 here, next up I want to talk about gaming on your Apple Silicon Mac specifically. And you know, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, the Mac is, you know, totally one-to-one with a Windows PC and all of that, with the selection and the optimization, and no, not yet. But they're getting closer and closer to making the Mac more competitive with Windows machines. First up, Cyberpunk 2077 was just ported over, and people are reporting great performance with it, even with M4 machines like my MacBook Air. So that's really exciting. The hardware is super powerful, and that is thanks to Metal 4 with updates in terms of frame interpolation, or sort of adding extra frames with AI and machine learning without stressing out your hardware or GPU, so you're getting more performance without it actually, you know, rendering it literally. So that's pretty great. And you also just get, again, AI enhancements and just more efficient performance and stuff in terms of ray tracing and all that. I don't know all of the specifics. I'm not an expert on this, but it's just a more efficient framework or GPU acceleration platform that is gonna allow, you know, game developers to bring more intensive games to Apple Silicon and take advantage of the amazing hardware, especially in like M4 Pro and Max chips. Even the M4 is doing well, and it can't hurt to have more RAM too. But with all of that said, you also get a dedicated games app, which is in the iOS 26 update and the iPadOS 26 update. I love this concept of this app because going through the App Store to discover games is just sort of bogged down and distracting with other categories, and also too, the App Store wasn't sort of reminding you of games you should play. So the Games app not only allows you to discover new games better, it also reminds you to play old games that you have, both Mac and iPad or iOS related, because you can run those on your Apple Silicon Macs. So I'm a huge fan of that. I might actually get back into some gaming because the Games app sort of brings that to the forefront and has it more focused rather than as this sort of disjointed experience in the App Store and also formerly Launchpad in your applications folder. So I'm a big fan of that. And again, it's really interesting to see how Apple is becoming more and more competitive in the computer gaming space. But anyway, getting back to productivity, the last feature I want to talk about that's new with macOS Tahoe is the ability to put widgets on your desktop. And at first I was like, oh cool, you know, they look nice, whatever, but I don't want that stuff in my way. But then I started placing widgets that I actually use, just like I do on my iPad. And this feature makes sense because on iPad, widgets take advantage of the huge screen space that you have, especially with the iPad Pro 13-inch and iPad Air 13-inch. This just makes sense on a Mac because you have even more screen real estate, especially if you have an ultra-wide like I do that I plug my MacBook Air into. And when I was setting up my widgets at the office, sort of, you know, picking ones that make sense, you know, then I realized like, oh, like this is functionally huge because, you know, widgets, the whole point of them is to provide information or toggles or access or features without the need to open up apps, which makes you even more efficient. So for example, having the weather there is nice without having to glance at my phone. Having the calendar view is nice because I don't have to open up my Notion or the calendar app to like answer a question about next week and what are you doing on the 26th? Like I can just look at that visual because chances are I don't think most people have the calendar grid in their head. Like it's not straightforward, so I have that there. I also have toggles to my home devices, like in my office where I want to turn on and off my window AC because I don't want to have that running all the time, especially when I'm leaving, so I don't have to go on my phone and do that or ask Siri, which works half the time. So that's great. I also have a ChatGPT one, so I can click that and open up the voice chat or just start a new chat. I have news ones. I have, what else? I have battery status. I have my Notion pages toggles, so I can click specific pages on that widget without having to open up a Notion to get there. That's huge. So I have all of this functionality at my fingertips on my desktop without needing to open up a whole new window, which for me is a bit of a nightmare because if you're ADHD, you just get so distracted by even productivity things. Like I'll see a page that will remind me of something else, and if I can just do something point A to point B without having to go through point A, B, C, D, E, F, G, that really just keeps me in the zone, focused, and I love that. But in general, if you just want to toggle something quickly or reference something quickly, these widgets on your desktop are a huge deal, and they look gorgeous with that liquid glass design. All of this to say, even though iOS and iPadOS are getting all the hype and the attention, I would argue, macOS Tahoe might just be the most underrated update of the bunch, simply because it brings so much functionality to your Mac that you didn't even know you needed, but makes so much sense beyond just the Liquid Glass update or redesign. Even without it, updates like the colored folders and also the widgets and most importantly Spotlight search just really change the way you use your Mac and make it even more of a productivity monster. So if you have a device like this, like my M4 MacBook Air here that you use for everyday productivity, business backend, whatever, I would feel confident updating to the public beta. I think it's worthwhile, even though it's not perfectly stable. It's gonna be even more stable in the fall, which is what I would recommend you update to if you have a device with a specific creative workflow like Final Cut Pro or Adobe or some other, Blender, I don't know, some other third-party app. Wait for developers or those developers to figure out the kinks and issues with the new update first, because I wouldn't want you updating your computer and not being able to use your creative app of choice, especially if you're making a living using it. So I just have this update again on my MacBook Air, my iMac, and my Mac Mini in my bedroom for now, but I will be updating in the fall once, again, everything is all smoothed out and my creative apps work perfectly. So yeah, that's my take. Update now if you're brave, or more so if you don't have a specific creative workflow. I would wait for the fall, but these features are so amazing. So if you can access them now, do it. If not, you certainly should be excited, especially for the redesign, because it just looks so wonderful, especially the dock. I love looking at it, especially with these transparent icons that I adore, that go well with my wallpapers. I actually sell a couple, so check that out in the description. Also, check out my link to monday.com and expect more content coming from me about iOS and iPadOS coming soon. And as always, I'm Noah, and I will catch you all in the next one.